everyone, and welcome to the Motivation Academy podcast. Every Monday and Friday, we come out with a short and to the point podcast to help transform yourself from who you are now to the person you want to be. My name is Owens, and the podcast starts now. Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk about risk versus reward and how it relates to not quitting. You know, most people, and that is most people, wait until something happens to them. They have a hard time making firm commitments and the resiliency to carry it out. If you want to take yourself to the next level, you have to be willing to take risk. You already have the ability to learn and grow as a person. If you don't continue to learn and grow, our brains will tell us to seek pleasure and don't take risk, which of course means you go nowhere. Quitting is a habit that we as humans learn over time. Justifying quitting is a learned skill, but is it the right kind? So to quit, you must have committed to something in the first place. For most people, it's because of a lack of planning. Most of us graduate high school, we'll start college, maybe serve in the military, raise a family, and then we stop. They just stop, and they get good at it. They give in to the pleasure of quitting. Most of you probably don't call it quitting. Most of us wouldn't. What you do, what do you use as the reason when you quit something? Let me tell you something. When you truly commit to something, quitting is not an option. When you commit to something like the worry of failure, when you commit to something, the worry of failure will in fact go away. You have to stay focused. Most people quit because they blame the process. Things like, oh, I got sick, or I'm too tired, I'm just exhausted, oh, I don't have time, I'm busy, oh, it was my birthday. There's always something that we allow to interfere with the process of pushing forward with a commitment in order to attain some sort of goal of some kind. Use commitment as tell you what, here's a suggestion for you. See if this works for you. Use committing as a temporary indulgence to feel better from a lack of action. So, let me give you some examples of the things that I've done and what's worked for me, and maybe this will help you in your life as well. So, for example, when it was after I left the military. I was back into the civilian world trying to learn how to be a civilian again, which is exceedingly difficult when the people around me do not think the way I do. They're not committed. They're not, how can I explain this? They don't have the discipline that people in the military do. They're not accustomed to fast-paced environments. The private sector is actually very slow. It's apples and oranges different from what we're accustomed to in the military. So it's a hard adjustment to make. And some of the challenges that I experienced was, well, in order to commit to something, there must be a plan, right? You have to have a plan. I had a plan to go back to school, which I did do. I was working a full-time job, working all night long, and then I went to school half the next day. And I would go home and I would eat something, try and study a little bit, go back to work again, work all night again, show up for class the next morning, and do it again. Well, I made a commitment. So why did I make the commitment? Well, because there's a long-term payoff. There's pain in the short term, but there's a gain at the end of it. Think of it like sports. I'll use a sports analogy. So, for example, when I was in high school, I ran long distance. I also did other things too. I did hurdles. I did relays, all things like that. But when I ran long distance, I enjoyed it because it was a solo event. It wasn't where I was working on a team with lots of other people and I had to coordinate what I was doing so that not only I was helping them, they were helping me so we could all win, that kind of thing. And I don't have anything, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have anything against it. I've played on teams before, but I loved the independence and the solo kind of feeling with I'm running long distance. It kept me healthy. It pumped lots of oxygen into my brain. So when you run long distance, your brain gets almost an overload of oxygen, which is great because you're on a natural high when you're done anyway. And that's the best kind there is the natural kind. You feel fantastic. You stay healthy. But here's the thing related to the podcast and running. So if you're running long distance, I'll use this as an example. I ran the Kentucky Derby mini marathon a long time ago. This was in high school. And it's 13.2 miles, right? So I was already pretty much healthy and ready to go up to speed because of the track and cross country that I ran in high school. It prepped me for that sort of thing. And over time, I extended what I was already doing in high school and adding to it so that I could continue running even further so that I could be ready for the race. Well, the race had literally thousands and thousands of runners. And we started out in Iroquois Park, and we ran out of the park, ran through all kinds of parts of the town, and we ended up, at the end of the race, we ended up in downtown Louisville, where the waterfront is. Well, here's the point I'm trying to make. So as a long distance runner, do you get to, on a 13-mile race, do you get to mile 5 and quit? No, I would hope not, because you're never going to reach 10, much less 13 miles. So do you quit at 10 miles? You get to 10 miles and go, oh, you know what, I got cramps, oh, this really hurts, I'm done. Well, that's easy to do, right? You don't want to give in to the pleasure of quitting, because then you just destroyed the point of your commitment in the first place, and then of course you don't reach your goal. Well, in sports, and anybody out there listening to this podcast who has played sports, whether it was high school, college, or pro, you can relate to the pain that you feel when you push yourself. Of course it's going to hurt. It's supposed to. You're pushing your body beyond what it's normally capable of doing. If you've never ran 13 before, let's say you run 10, right, and you're going to run 13 miles, you're going to say, you know what, no, I'm going to keep going. You're going to say that you're going to think this to yourself as you're still running, but you're thinking while you're running, no, I'm going to keep going. Here I am at 10 miles. I'm going to keep going. So you're telling your brain, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to keep going. And so you keep running. Now, for those of you that have never run long distance, what happens is, if you're already accustomed to running at least up to 5 miles, the first 2 miles, maybe even 3, are the hardest. And the reason why is because as you run, your body is building up lactic acid, and your body is warming up. The muscles are warming up and loosening up, and all kinds of things are happening inside your body. And the first 2 miles usually aren't the most fun, but when you hit mile 3 or so, 3 or 4, your muscles loosen up, they're warmed up, you start feeling better, it gets a little easier, your breathing calms down, and that's when you can really go for it. Well, that's how long distance is. Well, that's how life is, folks. That's how life is. Life is like that. If you commit to something and you get to a certain point, you go, oh man, I just can't do this anymore. I got to stop. This hurts. It's hard. It's hard. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to quit. So I'm going to give in to pleasure, and my brain's going to say, you know what, dude, just stay home. Just stay home, put on Netflix, eat some food, and, world's coming to an end, let it go, who cares? No, you don't do that, because if you do, you're never going to achieve your goal. You're never going to realize how far can you go. Have you ever wondered that? Have any of you ever wondered how far can I go? Have you ever wondered that? I put some real thought into that in my lifetime. I've done a lot of things in my lifetime. A lot of things. Probably a lot more than most people my age. I've participated in sports in high school. I served in the military. I have all kinds of medals and ribbons. I raised a family. I became a single working father, raised 2 sons and a daughter on my own. Went to school while I was working all night long. I stood up in class just to stay awake so that I could finish and graduate. I was a member of the school newspaper, and I was on the dean's list, and my GPA was 4.0. Now, if that's not an example of showing what a commitment is, then I guess I'm not committed. But I did stay committed. So you're probably wondering, well, what motivated you to want to do that? What motivated you to want to, after working all night long, stand up in class, go from be in class from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, and you kept doing that, and you were on the school paper, and you achieved a grade point average of 4.0. What in the world motivated you to do that? Well, one of my motivations, a big motivation actually, was the fact that I was a single working father with 3 kids depending on me. My wife was killed in an auto accident, and my life was turned inside out, and I am not the kind of a person who would even consider not raising my children. I wouldn't even consider it. It wouldn't even be a thought in my head. I'm not that kind of a person, and I'm not a quitter. And my life is an example of the fact that I'm not a quitter. I have never quit anything in my life. Now, years later, after I was getting close to being done raising my kids, I learned martial arts because I never got a chance to do that when I was a kid in high school. All the kids around me, it seemed like, were out there learning, martial arts, and they had 2 parents who could take turns, I guess, taking the kid to their dojo and learning and paying for it and all that. I was raised by a single working mother of the World War II generation, and she owned her own business, but she didn't have the money. She really didn't have the time to commit to that sort of thing. So I was kind of making up for that as an adult. Anyway, I made the decision to give it a try. Now, I wasn't committed immediately necessarily. I wanted to try it. So I went to the school, talked to the instructor. I said, okay, here's what I'm interested in, something I wanted to try. I've never been able to. The reason why I want to take martial arts, because the instructor did ask me, so, Mr. Owens, why do you want to take martial arts? And I told the instructor, I said, well, first and foremost, I wasn't able to when I was a kid. Second, I want to learn self-defense. Third, I want to gain more confidence. Fourth, I know it's a great way to stay healthy. And then the list goes on from there. And so the instructor smiled. Of course, they understood. They hear that a lot from people. And I spent the next 4, almost 5 years studying, working really hard, and committing myself to achieving, not only finishing all the training from white belt all the way to black belt, but actually achieving first degree black belt. Now, when I got to first degree black belt, I decided I enjoyed it so much I wanted to keep going. So then I achieved second degree black belt, and I was in the process of training for third degree black belt when I had to stop and I had to retire from martial arts. And the reason why is not because I'm a quitter, because if you achieve black belt, you're not a quitter. You've already proven you're not a quitter. It's people who stop prior to that that are the quitters. And I quit because number one, I couldn't continue to afford it anymore. It gets really expensive at that level because you're paying for literally everything. You're paying for any new uniforms you need because they do wear out over time. You pay for the belt that you're testing for. You pay for any trophies that you get at a competition. You pay for everything. T-shirts, you name it. Everything comes out of your pocket. So it was that and the physicality of the sport and the fact that I was aging, and I started in my late 30s and I was in my 40s, and I just, my body was saying, look, man. And that doesn't mean I'm a quitter, because I already achieved second degree. I've already proven to myself that I achieved the goal that I set out, which of course was first degree. I finished what I started. I surpassed that point, and I just decided, you know what? I'm happy with this. I was happy with where I was with that because I had achieved it. I already proven it to myself. I didn't need to prove it to my family. My family already knew what I was capable of. I didn't have to prove anything to them. And anybody who would question, they hear me say that and they go, well, then you're a quitter. No, I proved to myself I achieved my goal and I'm not a quitter. I also proved to over 300,000 members of the American Taekwondo Association that I'm not a quitter. Because had that been the case, I wouldn't have made first degree, much less second. So how does this relate to the theme of this podcast? Well, let's go back to quitting versus committing, right? So that's what we were talking about earlier, quitting versus committing. Because when you commit to something, you're actually telling your brain, no, I'm not going to just stop and I'm going to give into the pleasure of quitting because it's so easy. And because there's a risk versus a reward with that, right? So that's the other part of the podcast, risk versus reward. There's a risk involved in us achieving things that we're seeking, and there's a reward for it. So what's the risk in you wanting to, learn oil painting, play an instrument, take a class in college for whatever it is you're taking a course for? What's the risk for you, learning how to run long distance just on the side when you're not working your day job just to stay healthy? What's the risk? Well, the risk is it's going to hurt. Okay, what's the reward? The reward is you're going to stay healthy. The reward is I'm going to learn something new. The reward is I'm going to learn how to oil paint or play an instrument. What's the risk? I might fail. That's the risk. I want to do it because I might fail. Yeah, that's right, you might. But are you going to keep going if that does happen? Are you going to just give in? See, life is full of risk versus reward. If Alexander Graham Bell was not willing to risk achieving the light bulb 2,000 times, no, sorry, wrong guy. If Thomas Edison wasn't willing to take the risk and accept the risk of inventing the light bulb after 2,000 attempts, where would we be today? If NASA had not committed to putting a man on the moon, would we have achieved it? Yes, it came at a price, but we kept going, though, didn't we? We didn't quit, right? So human history itself is replete with examples of people who have never given in to the pleasure of quitting. They took the risk, they got the reward. Everything you do in life involves risk versus reward. You have to be willing to make the commitment. You have to tell yourself, look, I know this is going to hurt, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to try. Because if you don't try, you're never going to know. How far do you want to go in life? Folks, have you ever thought about asking yourself that? How far do you want to go? Do you want to finish high school, go to college, get your degree, start a family, and then what? Then you're going to stop, right? That's where you stop. You don't want to push yourself anymore. That's it. You're done. Time to go back into your cave, watch your Netflix, and say, you know what? Life stops here. Well, I would hope not. Don't you want to find out what you're capable of? What are you capable of? Go learn something. Learn how to oil paint. Learn how to play an instrument. Play a sport. Try learning websites. Learn podcasting. Something. Go do something and push yourself beyond the point of where you got from high school to family, and then what's next? Push yourself beyond that. Take something small. Here's a trick, okay? And you may not know this. When you do something, don't bite off too much at first. Take small steps, because the biggest goals are never achieved by taking big steps. Whenever you climb up a ladder, do you climb it 3 or 4 rungs at a time? Or do you take 1 step at a time? You take 1 step at a time. Okay? So life is like that. Don't try and climb up that ladder 3 or 4 steps at a time. Just take 1 at a time. So if you want to learn how to run long distance, start with 1 mile. Eventually you'll go to 2 and 3 and so on. If you're learning how to play an instrument, learn the basics of it. Like you want to play guitar, for example. Okay? Learn the basics first. And slowly, gradually move on to other things and add more skill. Because committing is a skill, right? Failure is also a skill. Failure is a learned skill. It's ingrained in us as human beings to want to quit, to fail. it's too easy to try something and they go, oh, this hurts. I don't have time. I'm sick. I got too much stuff going on. I got a birthday, whatever. Let's go hide in our cave. No. Because if you do that, you're never going to realize how far can you go, right? So when you want to achieve something, don't quit when it starts to get hard. That's the one spot that will separate you from all of your competition, from everybody else out there, is your willingness to get to that point and go, you know what? I know this hurts. I know this takes time. I'm going to keep going. Just keep going. Don't ever quit. Don't stop. Because if you do, it's all over with. Life wins, you lose. Now, as a life coaching tip, that's what I'm trying to get you to understand, is that you don't quit. You don't stop, right? Don't ever quit. Don't ever stop. It's ingrained in us to do that. Don't. Train your brain to keep going. Now, see, how many guys out there would have done what I did, would have accepted the responsibility of 2 sons and a daughter? When I was raising my kids, I struggled. And when I say struggled, I'm not talking about I had a hard time paying an electric bill. I'm talking about I struggled to put food on the table. At one point, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. You know what I had to do? I had to go to a plasma center and sell my blood for food money. But I kept going. I didn't allow that to get me to just quit and say I can't do this anymore. Because you know why? You know why I don't ever say that to myself? Why I never think that way? Because can't never did anything. Thanks for listening, folks. Also, remember to bookmark my podcast on SoundCloud. You can reach me on my social media websites, on Twitter at author Owens, also on Instagram at Eric Owens Author, or on Facebook at Eric Grant Owens. Also reach me on my website at ericgrantowens.com. Make sure to sign up for my newsletter so that you can keep up to date with my book publishing projects. Thanks for listening.